My daughter-in-law and her friend call me an ugly bum and laugh when I babysat for free, but now I'm having the last laugh as I watch their lives fall apart, and I don't plan on helping them. You don't get to 67 without having a few stories to tell. I've been through enough to know when to walk away, when to stand my ground, and when to let things slide. That's the wisdom that comes with age and experience. I am a retired military man. After serving my country for decades, I retired and thought I would have a peaceful life. But retirement doesn't mean sitting around all day. I like to keep busy, so I spent my post-military life coaching kids in baseball at a local club. Teaching those kids gives me a purpose. I love seeing them develop their skills, and I feel like, in some way, I'm giving back to the community. Now, I'm single. My wife passed away 4 years ago from COVID. I have a son who's married, and they recently had a baby. I was thrilled to see my granddaughter. I always wanted a daughter, but I only had a son, and we couldn't conceive after him. That's why, when my son and daughter-in-law came to ask me for help a little over 8 months ago, I didn't hesitate to lend a hand. My granddaughter had been born, and like many young couples, they were financially strapped. They both have full-time jobs, which is fine, but they were struggling to find affordable childcare. We all know daycare is very expensive nowadays, and hiring a nanny is even more so. They couldn't afford it. So, when my daughter-in-law's maternity leave ended, I offered to watch my granddaughter. Why not? I have the time, and I love the little girl. Plus, it would give me the chance to bond with her, something I wasn't able to do when my son was young because I was almost always deployed. For the past 8 months, that's exactly what I've been doing, taking care of my granddaughter during the day while my son and daughter-in-law work. I didn't ask for anything in return, no money, no favors, just the satisfaction of knowing I was helping my family. After my morning class, I go to their house. By then, my daughter-in-law is ready to leave for work. I spend the day with the baby, keeping her entertained with activities, taking her for walks, playing with her, changing diapers, everything. At the end of the day, I stay at their house until my son and daughter-in-law return from work, just to make sure everything's in order before I go back to my own house. It's not an easy job, but it's not unbearable either. I love my granddaughter, and that's enough. However, there's something about my daughter-in-law that makes me uncomfortable. She hasn't been rude to me directly, but there's always a tension in the air, a coldness in her attitude. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it, but now I think it has to do with my physical appearance. I served my country, and I've taken bullets. I have a bullet scar on my right ear and a face that's tough and weathered, which may not be pleasant for my daughter-in-law. The coldness was bearable, but over the past 2 or 3 months, there's been something more. My daughter-in-law has a friend named Bonnie who often comes over in the afternoons. Sometimes she arrives with my daughter-in-law when she gets back from work. Normally, I play with my granddaughter in the front yard in the afternoon when my daughter-in-law arrives. She freshens up, picks up the baby from the yard, and then I leave. On days when Bonnie comes over, my daughter-in-law stays inside. She spends time with her friend and doesn't attend to the baby, so I stay longer to give her the chance to be with her friend. I don't know Bonnie very well, but from the first day I saw her, I didn't like her. I'm not one to judge people too quickly, but there's something about her that doesn't sit right with me. Maybe it's the way she carries herself. She has an air of arrogance, like she thinks she's better than everyone else. Maybe I'm just being old-fashioned, but I think you can learn a lot about a person by how they treat others. Well, she treats me like I'm invisible. Every time Bonnie is at the house, she and my daughter-in-law sit in the living room or the kitchen, chatting and laughing. That part doesn't bother me. But every time I walk past them or enter the house, I catch them exchanging strange glances, you know, the kind of sideways looks that make you feel like you're the punchline of a joke you're not in on. I've caught them several times looking at me and whispering something, as if I'm the topic of conversation. When they make eye contact with me, they just smile at each other knowingly. It makes me uncomfortable, but I don't want to make a scene. After all, I'm there to take care of my granddaughter, not to worry about what 2 women in their 30s think of me. But it's not just the glances, there's an overall vibe of judgment coming from them, as if I don't belong there. I'm in the living room playing with my granddaughter, and I hear whispers coming from the kitchen. Sometimes they stop talking completely when I walk by, only to start again as soon as I'm out of earshot. They don't have to say anything for me to know they're talking about me, the atmosphere becomes heavy with it. It bothers me, but I thought, it doesn't matter, they're just a couple of immature women gossiping. I'm an adult man, I don't need their validation. My job is to take care of my granddaughter, and I'm doing it well. But in the back of my mind, I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. There's one more thing, my daughter-in-law never seems to appreciate the help I'm giving her, at least not the way I thought she would. But I keep doing it because I want to support my son and his family. I talked to my friends about it, and they brushed it off, saying I was just overthinking it. Why the hell would these 2 women bother with you? They have plenty of other things to gossip about. I really don't know what to do in this situation. Am I overthinking it? I've done some research on this, and according to some websites, I might be suffering from some kind of disorder. I don't know. It's so lonely being an older man. I don't have anyone who understands me. I definitely can't confront my son about this, and my friends brushed off my concerns. It's gotten to the point where I don't want to take care of my granddaughter anymore, and every time I see Bonnie, I just want to run away. Am I going crazy? Is what I'm feeling real? Update 1. I was a little afraid people would call me crazy, but I'm grateful that many here told me I'm not. The vibe is real. I'll tell you that because I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear, and it showed me that you really should trust your instincts. Bonnie said something that hit me like a bucket of cold water. The day before yesterday, during a normal afternoon, my daughter-in-law came home from work with Bonnie. It was raining outside, so I was playing with my granddaughter in the living room. They walked past me, and as usual, I felt that negative vibe radiating from their looks. Since I was in the living room, they sat down to talk. After a while, I went to the bathroom, and just at that moment, my granddaughter started crying. They didn't see me go to the bathroom. My daughter-in-law and her friend ran out of the room to attend to her. Her friend said, "When did he leave?" My daughter-in-law replied, "No idea, how could he leave the baby alone without telling us?" The bathroom is connected to the living room, so I could hear every word clearly. Then Bonnie said, "That ugly bum has a bad attitude, huh?" I was frozen. Ugly bum was clearly about me, there was no doubt. What really hurt me wasn't just Bonnie's unpleasant comment, but my daughter-in-law's reaction. She laughed, as if it were the funniest thing in the world. I stood there for a moment trying to process what I had just heard. I didn't know whether to confront them right then or let it go like I had for months, but something inside me broke. I wasn't going to stay there and let them disrespect me like that, after everything I had done to help them. I couldn't keep hiding and tolerating them. I went out, and they got nervous. I asked them what they had just said. They both looked at me like deer caught in headlights. "Oh, we weren't talking about you," Bonnie quickly said with a fake smile on her face. My daughter-in-law just looked at me in silence. I said, "I wasn't born yesterday. I know exactly what I heard. If you have something to say it to my face instead of talking behind my back. I'm a military man, and I know how to take bullets to the chest." Bonnie rolled her eyes at my statement. My daughter-in-law remained silent. Bonnie repeated the same excuse. "How many times do we have to tell you it wasn't about you? We were talking about our coworker." I said, "Well then, repeat the whole conversation, and let's see who you were really talking about." Bonnie gestured toward my daughter-in-law, and she intervened. "Let it go, why are you making such a big deal out of this? It wasn't about you." I ignored her and looked at Bonnie. I said, "I have a rough appearance because I've spent half my life serving and protecting my country so that people like you can sleep peacefully in their homes. And I'm not a bum, I don't depend on my son and daughter-in-law's money. I earn a living, and I come here to help my family without asking for anything in return." My daughter-in-law asked me to stop scolding her friend because, according to her, what I had overheard wasn't about me. "Forget it," I said, and left their house. They didn't have the courage to admit what they had said, so to avoid further arguments, I defended myself and confronted them. That was enough. An hour later, my son showed up at my house, furious. His first sentence was, "You need to apologize to Bonnie." I said, "What? Apologize to Bonnie? Why?" "For defending myself." He said I humiliated his guest. Apparently, according to his wife, they were talking about random things, and I eavesdropped on the conversation. "Out of nowhere, you got involved with them," he said. I asked him if he thought his father was crazy and would confront people for no reason. I told him what I had heard, but I realized he wasn't interested in hearing my side. He was more concerned about me apologizing to Bonnie to save her reputation in their social circle. "Apologize, my ass," I said. "I don't give a damn what your wife or her friend do. I didn't disrespect anyone, and I'm not going to apologize." He left my house furious. His attitude made my blood boil. How dare he throw a tantrum at me when I was the one who had been wronged by his wife's friend? That poor man has been so manipulated by his wife that he's lost all common sense. I swallowed my anger with a glass of malt whiskey and passed out. The next morning, yesterday, I woke up at my usual time. I did my routine, trained my students, and then went to the park to relax. I saw that my phone was filling up with messages from my son, asking when I would go take care of his daughter. I completely ignored it. I let the calls go to voicemail and carried on with my day. I came back after my walk, had lunch, and was enjoying a very pleasant afternoon nap when someone started ringing my doorbell insistently. I was expecting that visitor. Yes, my son. I opened the door, and he started ranting, "Where have you been since this morning? I've been calling and texting you. I came here twice to look for you, where were you?" I was ready for that conversation. I asked, "Why are you looking for me? Were you worried about me?" He got confused and said, "No? I mean, yes. Why didn't you go take care of the baby?" I smiled and replied, "That's why I spent the day relaxing in the park." He started ranting again. "What? Seriously, you spent the day resting while I missed work and had to stay with the baby? I called you so many times, I even came here twice, how can you be so irresponsible?" I stared at him, and he stopped immediately. "First of all, you have no right to question me. How much do you pay me to take care of the baby? Nothing, so you can't come demanding anything. Second, I didn't go because I didn't want to." He interrupted, saying, "You could have let us know if you wanted to take a break." I laughed and replied, "I don't work for you, so I don't have to notify you if I'm not going to show up. I did you a favor, and now I'm withdrawing it." He fell silent, then realized I was probably still upset about the incident from the night before. "What a loser," I said. "I'm not a bum. You can't defend the ugly comment, and I'm definitely not going back to that house where they disrespect me." He realized he had messed up, softened his tone, sat down, and said, "Dad, look, I'm sorry if that's what you want. We need you. Bonnie may have said something out of place, but she's our guest, you know? If something bothered you, you could have told us later instead of confronting her right then." I said, "Let me see if I understand this correctly. She insulted me, and your wife enjoyed it. She should have stopped her, but she didn't. I'm not a coward, I had to defend myself. Then, you came here and threw a tantrum instead of apologizing. That was the last straw. It's all over now." We were still talking when his wife called, yelling about his absence. He yelled back that he was cleaning up the mess that Bonnie and she created. Apparently, my daughter-in-law left for work, asking my son to take care of their daughter. He was working from home, expecting me to arrive. He thought I was just delayed, but when I didn't show up, he struggled to handle the baby and his work. His wife came back in the middle of the day, and they were both anxious because they had missed work. My son left saying, "I'm going to make that woman regret it and apologize to you." I told him, "No apology will change anything." A few hours later, he showed up with his daughter. I knew it, he's not a man who can make his wife apologize for her mistakes. I smiled and asked, "What happened with your wife?" He said, "She's working, she has to finish her tasks, but I told her that you're upset with her behavior and also with Bonnie's attitude." Then he added, "There's something else I need to tell you. Actually, Bonnie's grandparents and parents had some problems with the US military, so she's not very fond of the military, you know? Also, she sees you at home all the time, so she might have gotten some thoughts in her head and got a bit sarcastic. But I'm sure my wife had nothing to do with Bonnie's comments." I told him, "What she said about me had nothing to do with my profession, it was pure malice and mockery. She commented on my appearance and the fact that I spend my days at your house, living off your charity. Also, I have no resentment toward Bonnie, she means nothing to me. But your wife, how could she laugh at such degrading comments?" He asked me to forget everything and go back to taking care of their daughter since they couldn't afford a nanny. I felt a wave of anger rise within me. I've been busting my back for them for 8 months, and this is how they thank me. Not only did my daughter-in-law let her friend disrespect me, but now my own son was overlooking it, as if it were nothing. He didn't care about my feelings at all, he just saw me as a convenient solution to their childcare problems. Things escalated when I stood firm and said I would no longer take care of his daughter. As much as I love my granddaughter, I'm not going to sacrifice my self-esteem for love. I told him, "I'm not a bum. I have my own life, and I'm done with your free work. If your wife thinks I'm just sitting around doing nothing, then maybe you should start asking her to take care of the baby." My son tried to reason with me, but I wasn't willing to listen. I'd had enough. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. I told him he would have to manage with the childcare on his own from now on. I know I've put up a barrier between my son and me, but I don't care. I need to stand up for myself. They crossed a line, and now they have to face the consequences. Update 2. A couple of months passed, and I hadn't heard from my son. He had basically given up on taking care of his daughter, and from what I know, they were struggling to find someone else who could do it. I assumed they would have to pay for daycare or convince some acquaintance to help, but it was no longer my problem. Yesterday afternoon, I received an unexpected visit from my son. He arrived at my house looking disheveled, red eyes, wrinkled clothes, and generally an expression of defeat on his face. I called him to come in, already having a bad feeling about what was coming next. He simply sat down and stared at the floor, clearly gathering the courage to say something. I casually asked, "What's going on?" and he broke down in tears, burying his face in his hands. It turns out that Bonnie was a scammer. She convinced my daughter-in-law to invest in a scheme that supposedly tripled her money in a year. Apparently, it involved a fake company. I didn't understand all the details, nor did I bother to investigate further. My daughter-in-law was so impressed with the scheme that she didn't just invest her savings, but also part of my son's money. And guess what happened to Bonnie after that? She disappeared as if she never existed. They filed a police report and even went to the cyber unit to trace the payment, but they had no luck. I was in shock when I found out. I mean, Bonnie wasn't just an acquaintance that my daughter-in-law had met at a mall or a hair salon, she was her coworker. But she didn't show up to work, her house was empty, and when the police took the office details and contacted her parents, it turned out to be a wrong number. I didn't know what to say. On one hand, I felt terrible for them, on the other, I couldn't stop thinking about all the times my son dismissed my concerns, defended Bonnie's behavior, and minimized my feelings. He defended her over me and even asked me to apologize just to please her. My son broke down and asked for my help. He wanted me to start taking care of his daughter again and also asked for money to help them get out of the situation. I politely declined. I told him, I feel bad for you, but you brought this on yourself. Your wife chose to laugh and enjoy the degrading comments her friend made about me. She had fun when her friend insulted me, and you decided to side with your wife and her scammer friend, ignoring my feelings. So now you have to live with that decision. I can't help you anymore. He said he couldn't make ends meet, let alone hire a nanny. I replied, and yet, your wife's ego is so big that she didn't come here, even though you're in trouble, as you say. He asked if his wife's apology would convince me to help them. I told him, no, her apology means nothing to me, just as your tears mean nothing. I'm not going to be swayed by crocodile tears or a half-hearted apology, and I'm certainly not going to give you my savings or offer my free service. He also hinted that he might need my help someday, since I'm getting older. I've thought about it, but I know that if I were ever in a situation where I needed their help, they would never have stepped up. So why should I? He tried to make me feel guilty by saying I was turning my back on my granddaughter, who was innocent in all of this. I told him, if my granddaughter grows up to be a sensible person, she'll respect me for standing up for myself. He left with a bitter expression. I know I can never count on them, but it's not because I rejected them this time. They would never have supported me, so it's better to save myself from being exploited. I will accept whatever God has planned for me in my old age. I'm not going to lose sleep over this. I'm enjoying my life to the fullest. I've joined a full-time school to train students, and I couldn't be happier with it. Update 3. Well, here I am again, and it seems like things have changed quite a bit since my last update. The past few months have been hard, being away from my granddaughter, but I've managed to move forward, and now, finally, I'm ready to tell you how things are going. As I mentioned before, I stopped taking care of my granddaughter. Honestly, I don't regret it. It's been 5 months since I last spoke to my son, and although I miss my granddaughter at times, I believe I made the right decision. Throughout all this time, my daughter-in-law hasn't even had the decency to swallow her pride and apologize. And even if she did now, I doubt it would change anything because I know it wouldn't be sincere. She never wanted a relationship with me, she only saw me as the free babysitter who made her life easier. So, what's been happening with them? Well, I heard from some acquaintances that things haven't been easy for my son and his wife since I stopped taking care of their daughter. Things have gotten pretty complicated. Apparently, my son had to quit his job to stay at home with the baby because they couldn't afford a daycare or anyone else to do it. They had to cut back on expenses and move to a smaller place because with only one income, they couldn't maintain the house they lived in before. This made me think, why wasn't my daughter-in-law the one staying at home? Honestly, I'm not sure, but I have 2 theories. The first is that she probably earned more money than my son, so from a practical standpoint, it made more sense for him to quit his job. The second theory, and the one I believe is more likely, is that she simply doesn't care much about spending time with her child. I had noticed this when I was still the babysitter. As soon as she'd get home, she wouldn't worry about the baby, she'd go hang out with her friends or do her own thing. I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't want to stay home to take care of her own daughter. It hasn't helped that they lost all or most of their savings because of Bonnie. But if, instead of attacking me, they had seen the signs that Bonnie was a terrible person, they probably could have avoided all of this and wouldn't be in this mess today. And while I do miss my granddaughter, I've come to the conclusion that when she grows up, maybe we'll be able to reconnect. If she has some common sense, I hope she'll understand my stance and respect the fact that I stood up for myself when I was disrespected. It hurts, yes, but I can't be around the toxicity of her parents. Maybe one day, when she's older and hasn't been influenced by her mother's opinions, we can build a different kind of relationship. But right now, that's not something that keeps me up at night. Speaking of how my life is going, I'm really enjoying my time coaching kids full-time on the baseball team. This has been a huge change for me, and it fills me with satisfaction. I've always enjoyed serving, like I did during my years in the military, and now coaching these kids gives me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. These kids don't care about my appearance or judge me for looking rough or like a bum, as I was called before. In fact, they love my past. They always ask me to tell them stories from my time in service. Obviously, I can't share all the details, but they love hearing about how I got some of my scars, and those stories are really popular with them. It's funny because what some people would mock me for, these kids see as a source of respect and admiration. They look at me as a mentor, and I'm glad to be able to share some of my experiences with them. At the end of the day, being with these kids gives me more than I lost when I stepped away from my son and his family. I feel valued and respected, something I didn't feel in my own home during the last months I was taking care of my granddaughter. Now, I've continued hearing things about what's going on with my son and daughter-in-law, and here's the interesting part. It turns out that all this financial downfall and chaos they're in now wasn't just because I stopped being the babysitter. So here I am, coaching kids, enjoying my life, and doing what I love. I don't need validation from my son or his wife. I've learned to appreciate what I have, and now I surround myself with people who respect me and value what I bring.